Good morning, Bill. Well, yes, we find it an absolute mess as well. This came on the back of some bad polling for the Liberal government and also an inability to develop some consensus on two key policy areas. One side was on some tax reforms and the other side was on a scheme that we were trying to develop, the National Energy Guarantee. And the tipping point for that was our Prime Minister's inability, or former Prime Minister's now, his inability to negotiate with hardline right-wing factions of the Liberal Party to have the Paris Agreement, the targets for the emissions, actually legislated. And the far right wanted to have that just regulated as opposed to having that enshrined in law. And that would mean that those targets could be amended by the stroke of a pen with successive governments. So because all these tensions had been simmering between the progressive side of the Liberal Party and the far right, it all kind of came to a head. And we did see the conservative base agitate for what we call a spill motion. And that spill motion came to a head today, but had been lingering for the last few days. We did have Peter Dutton, who was representing that Conservative base, but ultimately it didn't go in their favour at all, because the Prime Minister that is now taking the place and leading the country for Australia actually belongs to Malcolm Turnbull's division. So it does seem like a wasted effort from the Conservatives.
Absolutely. And on that, do we think that Scott Morrison's going to be able to do anything differently? Are we going to see ourselves back in this cycle again in a few months' time?
He's probably regarded a little less progressive than our former Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull. I have to get used to saying that. Malcolm Turnbull was an initiator of getting the plebiscite for gay marriage that we have here in Australia. So he's very will be remembered for that. Scott Morrison was his treasurer, and at the time when he first came into office as treasurer in 2013, he was responsible for quite a few hardline policies under our previous Prime Minister Tony Abbott. And with that, we implemented what was called Operation Sovereign Borders, which was a crackdown on immigration. And what that meant was that we had a zero-tolerance approach to asylum seekers who would come here by boat. And that was also coupled with mandatory detention. So that was happening around that time where Scott Morrison came into the ministry. That was all under the Abbott government. There has been a little bit of a shift, a bit of a change, a bit of a softened approach. So he is seen as someone who's an economic pragmatist, someone who can really do well for the books for the Australian government. So he hasn't quite outlined key policies that he would like to see pushed through, because he only put his hand up for the top job just yesterday. So a little bit of a surprise on our end, just as much as his. So we should start to see
an enormous surprise.
Sorry to cut you off,
Lara. Thank you very much. Lara Hyams in Sydney there.